With just over 10 days until the NHL Draft, we take a look at some third and fourth round potential gems and sleepers who would fit in perfectly with the Canucks as future stars. But before we get into that, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the bell icon so you don't miss any and all Canucks updates this offseason and heading into the draft. With that, let's hop into the first topic of the day, which is third round gems. And we see here that Vancouver doesn't have too many draft picks until later in the draft, with one in the third round at 93rd overall, one in the fourth round at 125th overall, two in the sixth at 162nd and 189th overall, one in the seventh round at 221st overall. So they're going to have to look for those diamonds in the rough, if you will, later in the draft, not those high profile guys that are going to go in the first two rounds. But don't forget, they found a guy like Artur Shilovs later in the draft who is now a permanent resident of this Vancouver Canucks roster, it would seem, after a breakout season and great postseason run that saw him take over that backup position and the ultimate starter position when Thatcher Demko couldn't come back from injury. But we're not talking about Shilovs in this video. We're talking about these draft prospects that we would love to see in Vancouver uniforms next, eventually in some point in time, or in an Abbotsford jersey, just working their way up through the system and just being future stars for this team. The first of which being the collection of three Swedish players. We know GM Patrik Allvin loves his Swedish players. First of which being Simon Zether, who is a right-handed center. He's 6'3", 186 pounds. As captain, he dominated the J20 league with Rogel earlier in the year, finishing second in points per game with 1.5, notching 27 points in 18 games. Spent the remainder of that season in the SHL as an 18-year-old, posting only 4 assists across 42 very limited games, where he averaged only 7 minutes and 3 seconds of ice time. His foot speed and limited his effectiveness of being faster against competition, so improving his skating will be something to do going forward. This is something that isn't going to be a stranger to any of these guys on this list. Like with anybody, they're going to have to improve with skating and adapt to the NHL and the AHL speed of play. That's going to be a thing with all of them. And another thing is going to be how they're all two-way players. The second of which being Alexander Zetterberg, who's another right-handed center. He's 5'7", 158 pounds, and that size is really what's keeping him off the radar for a lot of teams. And it gives a lot of opportunity for whatever team does jump on him to really utilize that and beef him up, where he could be really one of those guys who has that chip on his shoulder after being counted out with those much high profile guys because of his size. If he gets bigger, he could be someone who just turns the league on it, turns the opposers on his head just because they aren't expecting him to be much bigger. As one of Sweden's top U18 players, there's a good chance he would have been better had he been a bit taller. He does excel at creating scoring chances. You see that in his plus 16 or plus 26 plus minus rating. I've always said it's one of those underrated stats in hockey, and I think that's something that he definitely showcases. He'll create scoring chances for his teammates while also scoring himself. 21 goals, 37 assists, 58 points. That's someone you definitely want on your team as far as I'm concerned, even at such a young age. Then you have his teammate Melvin Fernstrom, who also had another phenomenal season. 45 games, 31 goals, 32 assists, 63 points, plus 25. That is insane for 6'1", 185 pounds. He's very talented. He excelled at that level with Zetterberg as his teammate. He led the league with 31 goals, like I said, and internationally he had 12 goals and 25 points in 27 games for Sweden at the U18. He's got a crazy shot. He's got an awesome one-timer and slap shot. He does have to work on his defensive skills a bit more, like these other guys. As they get bigger and develop more, they're going to get stronger. They're going to get faster. So they're going to adapt more to how these NHL players and AHL players play. Again, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a developmental thing. But again, this is something that I think everyone should be able to adapt to if they have the right coaching behind them and the right drive and physicality to make that happen. And the fourth prospect that we're looking at as a potential third-round pick is Colton Roberts from Maple Ridge, BC. He played the past 3 years with the Vancouver Giants in the WHL. And as you can see here, he's only gotten better and better. He's a 6'4", 198-pound defenseman, so he's a big guy. And he is putting up production where it goes from 1 point to 11 in 5 games. He went to 11 points in 62 and then 27 in 62. His plus minus rating wasn't that great. Again, I know it's a very useful stat when it's positive, and when it's negative as well, it can be very telling. However, when it's that with that production, it seems like, and that progression each year, I think that's something that can be potentially overlooked because that could just be the team that was around him maybe letting him down a little bit. However, I think he is someone who Vancouver should be very appealed towards heading into the draft, as someone who just is from BC. You can work him up through the system. Fans will love him just for that fact alone, I'm sure. But again, the third round does have some appeal. But for me personally, I find in the fourth round, that's where you're really going to find these fourth round sleepers. The first of which being the son of Saku Koivu, Atos Koivu, who is a 6 foot, 170 pound right-handed center. And you see here in his stats as well, he had a pretty solid season split up between the U18 and the U20 team with Finland, posting 9 goals, 13 assists, and 22 points with one, and 16 goals, 15 assists, and 31 points with the other. Splitting that time, he had a fairly good season with both of them. I think he's someone that he has a legacy to live up to with Saku Koivu and his uncle Mikko Koivu. They were both great in the 2000s. Growing up as an admirer of Saku Koivu and his game, he was somebody who, like the Stalls and the Suitors, like there was always that familial team in the familial connection in the NHL where you like to see siblings do well or play against each other. We see it with our very own Quinn Hughes playing against his brother Jack and Luke on the Devils. That matchup was great to see this year. It didn't disappoint as far as that matchup went. So I think bringing someone like the son of Saku Koivu into the league, especially on a Canadian team where his father played for the Montreal Canadiens, I think if you bring him into the league with the Vancouver Canucks, that would be pretty interesting. I would love to see it just as a hockey fan and just for the legacy of it. I think it would be great for fans. It would be great for views and for just overall news for the Canucks. I think everyone would be appealed by that. The second of which is Kevin He from Nobleton, Ontario. He's a left-handed left winger with the Niagara Ice Dogs. You see here, he had also a really good production as well. He was known as one of the best skaters in his entire class, blazing speed. He has basement dwelling. He was playing for the bad basement dwelling Niagara Ice Dogs. Finished second on his team in scoring, which is still pretty impressive being on a bad team. You see there with the plus-minus rating not being the greatest. I know that is also very telling of the team he's on, potentially like Colton Roberts, where it was the same situation. But Vancouver does need speed, and they need it bad. We saw with Ilya Mikheyev where all he had to offer was speed and nothing else. So if you have a guy like Kevin He where he can bring that speed and the goal scoring like he was able to do with a team like Niagara where they weren't very good and he was able to make the most of it, I think that'll be a great asset towards Vancouver in the future. Or if he's able to develop really fast, should they go with him, I think that's someone who could be very appealing as far as the speed side of things go for Vancouver, where we're a team who doesn't really have too much speed. So having somebody on the radar where speed is a very big factor of his game, I think that's very appealing for Vancouver going forward. The third of which being Anthony Cristoforo, who is from Woodbridge, Ontario, and he played for my hometown Windsor Spitfires for the past 2 seasons. Again, they were not good last year. He had a negative 43 rating to show for it. However, he did have 38 points to go with his 38 assists. In his debut season, he burst onto the scene and had a great season with 41 points. He did regress by 3 points in the second season, but this challenging environment had him step up in other ways, and he was able to rise to that occasion. Again, I might be a little biased being from Windsor, but I would personally love to see him in a Vancouver Canucks jersey for that fact alone. But I think he is someone who can just, like I've said with many of these guys, they can work their way up and develop through the system. And I think he's someone who definitely could be a good asset towards Vancouver. We see his production even being on bad teams. And I think like him and Kevin He, where they're guys who weren't on great teams, and and Colton Roberts as well, where they weren't on the best teams, but they were able to make the most of it and be the best guys on those teams. And I think they're flying with them flying under the radar with these other scouts and teams who were looking at more higher ranking minor league hockey teams. I think this really bodes well for Vancouver as to finding these guys under the radar, stealing them from teams so that they regret having overlooked them. And the last of which being another Anthony Romani, who is a right-handed right winger from Pickering, Ontario. He's 6 foot, 183 pounds. He finished second among all skaters with 43 points. And he also went to a whopping 111 points the following season. A massive leap in production. I think out of all the prospects, I think he's the one who stands out the most to me personally. I think His production says exactly that. You see a plus 43 rating. That's the best of anyone on this list. I think he is somebody who is definitely flying under the radar. If you're able to scoop him at that spot, maybe even in the third round, maybe be ballsy and go for him in the third round, because this is a guy who seemingly teams are just sleeping on. He was in a team like North Bay, way up there in Northern Ontario, and was making a massive splash through all the OHL. He really has been he's a star in the making, it seems like. If he can continue that into the AHL and the NHL, I think this is someone who could be that late round diamond or mid round diamond in the rough, where Vancouver just finds a star that nobody else was really looking for or really counting to be a star. So I think people are overlooking that. Again, 111 points over not even 80 games. That is just insane. I think he's someone that definitely Vancouver should be looking into. However, we're not going to know how this all shakes down. We'll see come draft day. Again, my top 3 picks would be Anthony Romani, Anthony Cristofaro. That might be a little biased. And I definitely think Melvin Fernstrom would be another great prospect to be looking at. So there's only 2 picks they're going to make. So maybe they make 2 out of those 3 picks. We'll see come June 28th, or into June 29th, I should say, as the later rounds do roll out. But with that, let's hop into our third comment topic, which is comment of the day. And we see here from Ride with Tim that, thank you. Your channel is turning into my go-to every morning. Keep it up. We love the support from the fans. We love reading your guys' comments, seeing how you guys would be as GMs. It's awesome to read the comments, going back and forth with Mark and seeing how other people are reacting to the news that we're breaking, or seeing what their thoughts are on everything as well, what they would do. It's awesome to see so many avid hockey fans just jumping into the conversation. We love the support. We can't wait to eventually go out to Vancouver someday to see you guys in person. We'll do some meet and greets. Who knows? We have so much stuff planned that we can't wait to get to. It's just the tip of the iceberg, and we can't wait to bring you guys more. But that's going to do it for this episode of Canucks Digest. We'll see you on the next one.